named the olfactory nerve, and the type of nerve is sensory, and the function it does is smell. The materials you need for the special test would be something that has a scent. A positive test is that you cannot smell the object, and a negative test is that you can smell the object. You would hold the object that smells up to their nose and ask them to close their eyes. So close your eyes and tell me if you smell something. So that would be a negative test. The second cranial nerve is called the optic nerve. The optic nerve is a sensory nerve, and the function of this nerve is sight. The materials needed for the special test is something to read and a light. A positive test would be if they could not read what you offered to them, and uneven pupil dilation. A negative test would be the pupils dilate evenly and they can read. This test is to see if their pupils dilate evenly. So you hold a pen light up to their eye and see if they dilate evenly. And hers would be a negative. Another test for the optic nerves is if they could read or not. So then I would ask her to read this line, please.
LPED.
If you didn't have a cell and eye chart with you, you could ask them to read something from a scoreboard or something from a distance.
Cranial nerve number 3. The name of the nerve is oculomotor. Its type is motor. Its function is the movement of the eye and the constriction of the pupil. The materials needed for the special test is a pen light. And a positive test would have a patient being unable to follow the finger and no pupil reaction. A negative test would be the patient follows the finger and the pupils react. I would have the patient follow my finger. Then I would have the patient open their eyes so I can look at their pupils. Cranial nerve number 4. The name of the nerve is trochlear. Its type is motor. Its function is eye movement. The materials needed for this special test. Positive test will be unable to move the eye and nystagmus, which is shaking of the eye. Negative test will be able to move the eye. Now I will have the patient follow my finger. Make sure you're far enough away from the patient so that they can follow.
The fifth cranial nerve is the trigeminal nerve. The type is both motor and sensory. The function is face sensation and motor control of the facial muscles. There are no materials needed for this test. A positive finding would be decreased sensation of the facial muscles, inability to contract muscle, full facial sensation, and motor function. You want to ask them to make some faces, so can you raise your eyebrows? Can you close your eyes? Touch their face and see if they have sensation on both sides of their face. The sixth cranial nerve is the abducens nerve. The type is motor. The function is lateral movement of the eye. There are no materials needed, and a positive test would be if they were unable to abduct their eye, and a negative test would be if they were able to abduct their eye. You want to move your finger so that the eye abducts.
Alright, so the seventh cranial nerve is facial. It's both sensory and motor. The function is taste and motor control of the facial muscles. For the special test, you'll need something to taste, like a piece of candy or maybe a drink. And then positive finding is unable to taste or difficulty performing the special test for the face. And negative is able to test and perform facial expressions. For the first test, you'll need something sweet, or like I said, a drink, and you're going to instruct the patient to taste it. Can you taste that? So the second test is asking the patient to perform some facial expressions like smiling or yawning. So go ahead and smile, frown. The eighth cranial nerve is the acoustic nerve. The type is sensory. The function is able to hear and balance. Materials needed for the special test is a tuning fork. A positive finding is unable to balance or unable to hear. Negative is able to hear it and balance. So the first test that we're going to perform is able to hear. So you need to take the tuning fork, strike it on your hand, test this ear, and then also test the opposite ear. Did you hear them? That's the first. Second test is able to test balance. So you're going to instruct the patient to stand up, and then on one leg and close your eyes, and then balance for 15 seconds. And that's the second test.
The next nerve is cranial nerve number 9. The name is glossopharyngeal. Its type is both motor and sensory. The function is to taste on the posterior aspect of the tongue. It also has the function of motor control of the pharynx. The materials you'll need for this special test are something to taste and a tongue depressor. Positive test would be unable to taste and also unable to swallow. A negative test, able to taste and also able to swallow. So for this special test, you will have something on like a tongue depressor, like in this case we'll use salsa, and we're going to put it on the posterior part of his tongue and see if he can taste it. Can you taste that, young man?
Yeah.
And that would be a negative. The next test you will have him do for the cranial nerve number 9 is a swallow test. And as it sounds, you will just have them swallow to see if they can. Can you swallow, sir? Any pain with that? That would be a negative test. The next nerve for cranial nerves is number 10, is the vagus nerve. Its type is both sensory and motor. The function of this nerve is sensation and movement of the pharynx and larynx. Materials you would need for this special test are a tongue depressor. A positive test would be no gag reflex when you stick a stick in their mouth. And a negative test would be a gag reflex with the stick in their mouth. For this test, first I will have him open his mouth, and I will look to see which way his uvula goes to make sure it goes to the strong side of his body. Next, I will test his gag reflex by inserting the stick into his mouth and see if he gags.
Cranial nerve 11. The name is spinal accessory. The type is a motor function, motor control of the trapezius and sternocleidomastoid. The material for the special test, we don't have any materials. Will be a positive test if the patient demonstrates unilateral weakness, and will be negative if there is no weakness. Okay, the special test will be shoulder shrug. So, should hold it. Okay, that will be negative test. Cranial nerve 12. Name hypoglossal. Type motor. Function motor control of the tongue. Material for the special test, none. Positive test will be patient cannot move tongue and deviation of tongue to one side. The negative test will be able to move tongue evenly to both sides. Can you move your tongue to the right, to the left, to the right again? Okay, that will be a negative test.
A good acronym to remember all of the cranial nerves is OOO, to touch and feel, a girl's velvet angel hair. And as you can see, the O is olfactory, optic, oculomotor, trochlear, trigeminal, abducens, facial, auditory, glossopharyngeal, vagus, accessory, and hypoglossal.
A good acronym to remember if the cranial nerve are sensory, motor, or both will be Some say marry money, but my brother says big boobs matter more.